One, Hopis are farmers, and water is scarce. They found it easier to conserve water if they worked together on large farms. Two, the Hopis have always been a peaceful people, but they were always being attacked by other tribes. A village on a cliff is easy to defend. Three, and perhaps most important, their religion requires a lot of cooperative effort, so they wanted to stay together. The cornerstone of that religion is ceremonial dancing. This is a social dance, a sort of training session for children. The religious dances are so sacred to the Hopis, they won't let anyone film them. But you can get an idea from the children of how much ceremony is involved in the real thing. According to Hopi religion, the dances are what make American crops grow and why rain falls in this country. The Hopis believe they are the sacred caretakers of the entire United States. There are about 8,000 Hopis in Arizona. The Navajos are nomads. Historians believe they slowly worked their way south from Canada to the southwest. They were first spotted in Arizona by Spanish conquistadors in 1583. The Navajos are herdsmen. Since it takes about 35 acres to keep one sheep alive in the desert, and since there are about 160,000 Navajos, they need a lot of land.
This soil we refer to as Mother Earth. And it contains many things that we consider life itself. Part of us, our soul and our spirit.
Unlike the Hopis, the Navajos live separate, isolated lives. Their homes, dome-roofed huts called hogans, are usually miles apart. But when a Navajo family builds a hogan, it and all the land around it instantly becomes sacred.
That land that the hogan encompasses becomes part of us because we are born on it. So it belongs to generations who have been before us, generations who will be after us.
Peter McDonald was chairman of the Navajos for 12 years.
Our umbilical cord is buried right where we are born. Take us away from it, we die. As simple as that.
In 1868, President Andrew Johnson gave the Navajos a 6,000 square mile reservation. The Navajos ignored the reservation boundaries and built hogans wherever they pleased. Since this was before air conditioning, and no one else particularly wanted the area, the government eventually gave them the land they were squatting on. They ended up with 25,000 square miles, a reservation bigger than West Virginia, and they have the Hopis surrounded. In 1882, President Chester Arthur gave the Hopis 6,000 square miles right in the middle of what became the Navajo Reservation. But there was a loophole in his executive order. It said the land belonged to the Hopis, and, quote, such other Indians as the Secretary of the Interior may see fit to settle thereon. The Navajos living on that land took that as an invitation to stay forever. The Hopis have always accused the Navajos of attacking them and stealing from them. Hopi Chairman Ivan Sidney says the Navajos are still at it.
The ranchers continue to be harassed, ranch homes burned, cattle stolen or shot, windmills vandalized. We can even have our reservation boundary signs put up without vandalism.
If we were marauders, we were as bad as they say we are, we lived in here for over several hundred of years, we would have wiped out the Hopis a long time ago.
In 1960, the Hopis went to court to try to get the Navajos off what they considered their reservation. A federal judge ruled the Navajos had been on the land too long to be moved. But he also ruled the Hopis were entitled to some land of their own, the land in and around their traditional villages. Congress passed a law partitioning off the land in question. A new fence was built to separate the Hopis and the Navajos. Anyone living on the wrong side of the fence was to be moved at government expense. There were only a few Hopis that had to move, and they are quickly being absorbed on the Hopi side of the fence. But there were a lot of Navajos on the wrong side of the fence, almost 10,000 of them. Navajo leaders could find no room for them and their sheep and cattle on the Navajo reservation. So most of the Navajos who were supposed to move stayed right where they were. This is the Big Mountain area, named indeed for that big mountain back there. Under the land division law, all this now belongs to the Hopis, in spite of the fact that no Hopi families live here. Almost 1,000 Navajos have lived here for generations. Big Mountain's Battle of Bunker Hill came in 1979, and the shot heard round the world, Navajo version, was fired by a 79-year-old woman, Catherine Smith. The Bureau of Indian Affairs hired Indians, most of them Navajos, to build a section of the boundary fence across her land. She fired a shotgun over their heads.
They said this land is not belongs to the Navajo, they belong to the Hopi, but it that's a lie, big lie.
So you didn't fire at anybody? You fired in the air?
Yes, I shoot them up in the air just to stop those fence crew.
That wasn't the end of the protest. As fast as workmen put up fence on Big Mountain, the people of Big Mountain tore it down. There still is no fence on Big Mountain. Some Navajos have moved, about 450 families. The Hopi Navajo Relocation Commission, set up by Congress, had a hard time finding places to put them. So most of those families ended up living in tract houses in cities in New Mexico and Arizona. Many of them say they were pressured, almost forced to move. Hosteen Nez is one of them. He once had 40 sheep and 60 steers and hundreds of acres of reservation land for them to graze on. Now he tries to grow a little corn in a garden behind a house in Flagstaff, Arizona. The U.S. government bought him the house, moved him in, and left him on his own.
I have to pay for it. The water over there. And then there's heat to keep the house warm and to cook. And then there's the land out here and the tax involved with it. Then I have to worry about insurance. I could not afford it.
Many Navajos living in cities are in the same predicament. They can't speak English and they can't find jobs. That means they can't pay their bills. 3 out of every 10 have already been forced to sell their new houses. The chairman of the Relocation Commission, Hawley Atkinson, denies anyone was pressured to move.
We would far prefer to have moved every relocatee onto the reservation, but the Navajo tribal chairman would not make the land available to us.
The estimated cost of relocating 10,000 Navajos has risen from $60 million to $500 million. Believing relocation is costing too much in both dollars and human suffering, Arizona Senator Dennis DeConcini has introduced a bill that would let the Navajos rent the Hopi land they're living on, with the government paying the rent bill. The Navajos have offered to buy the land in question from the Hopis, or buy the Hopis' new land in the Southwest.
This land is not for sale, and it'll continue to be that way.
The Navajos have also suggested they could buy the Hopis' land outside the area. Would that be acceptable?
That is not something that we will consider. The Navajo might consider that. They are a nomadic tribe.
The taxpayers may not allow this whole thing to happen, even if the law says it must be done, because the cost is now have been estimated to be around $500 million just to do this crazy silliness of removing 10,000 Navajos to someplace else. $500 million. For what? Just to create a disaster.
The Navajo leadership has been very forthright and candid. It said, our principal goal and really only goal is to repeal the law. If the Navajo tribal leadership would have extended the hand of cooperation and worked with us for the betterment of their own Navajo relocatee, we'd have been a lot farther down the road and there'd have been a lot less heartbreak.
Congress tries to come up with a better law. The courts try suits and countersuits. But meanwhile, the government is spending hundreds of millions moving Navajos into housing settlements like this one outside Flagstaff, leaving many of the Navajos confused and unhappy, separated from their sacred land and ancient traditions. After 100 years, these Navajos think things are worse than ever. This week, a newly elected Navajo chairman took office. He is Peterson Za, and he's a longtime friend of Ivan Sidney, the Hopi chairman. In his inaugural address, Chairman Za, with Chairman Sidney listening, suggested it was time to stop talking through lawyers. Time, he said, for a little feast under a tree and a lot of understanding.
You are so beautiful to me.
Today's your big day.
Can't you see?
I wish Daddy were
You're
here.
everything I hoped for. You're everything I need.
He is. He sent these.
You are so beautiful.
Through the magic of FTD, you can be sure that the special people in your life receive the special care they deserve. Just call your FTD florist.
You're looking at the two best reasons I take good care of my brakes. They're why I go to Midas on a regular basis. Midas inspects brakes the right way. They pull the wheel. If anything needs doing, I know it gets done right. Some people say I'm overly cautious, but I don't think so. I just feel better going to Midas.
Where nothing but the best is ever gonna do. Trust the Midas touch.
"60 Minutes, a CBS News weekly magazine, will continue.